She was 15 years old, feathered blonde hair, a smile that could light up the darkest of rooms. A girl who had moved from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to Palo Alto, California. New city, new school, new everything, and within months had already made it feel like home, new friends. A boyfriend she liked enough to ride a bus 10 miles in the dark to go see. On the evening of September 2nd, 1982, Karen Stitt took that bus to Sunnyvale to spend the evening with her boyfriend. They played video games at a 7-Eleven. They wandered around a miniature golf course. They walked to an elementary school and sat and talked the way teenagers do when time feels infinite and nothing bad has ever happened. Around 12:30 in the morning on September 3rd, her boyfriend walked her back to the bus stop at the corner of El Camino Real and South Wolf Road. He was 17. He had a curfew. He walked her partway and then ran home, not because he was callous, but because he was a kid who didn't want to get in trouble. He ran home. He did not stay. And Karen was left alone at that bus stop. 100 yards away, her naked body was found the following morning by a truck driver making an early delivery. She had been sexually assaulted. She had been stabbed 59 times. Her own clothes had been used to bind her arms and legs. She was hidden at the base of a blood-stained cinder block wall like something her killer wanted the world to forget. The world did not forget. And 40 years later, a detective who refused to give up, who scoured obituaries and social media posts and knocked on a door in Maui, Hawaii, made sure the man who did it finally answered for every single one of those 59 stab wounds. In a courtroom, on the record, out loud. This is Karen's story. The Bay Area in 1982 was changing fast. Silicon Valley was beginning its transformation from orange groves and suburban sprawl into the technology capital of the world. Palo Alto was at the center of it, a university city of tree-lined streets, ambitious families, and a school system that attracted people from across the country. Karen Stitt had arrived from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with her father, her older sister Suzanne, and her brother. The family had moved west for a new start. Karen's mother had died, a loss that had reshaped the family, that had sent them across the country to begin again somewhere new. She was 15 years old and a sophomore at Palo Alto High School, one of the most academically competitive high schools in the state. She was not intimidated by any of it. Her former boyfriend, Michael Calhoun, not the boyfriend she was visiting that night, but a boy from her school who had known her and loved her in his own teenage way, described her with the kind of precision that only grief makes possible. He said that from the first time he set eyes on her, he knew she was special. Her smile, he said, could light up the darkest of rooms. Her feathered blonde hair, the way she spoke, not quite an accent, but something distinct, something Pittsburgh, that hadn't entirely been replaced by California. She was different from anyone he had known. She fit in quickly despite everything. She made friends easily, the way warm people always do. Her paternal aunt Robin Morris would say later simply, completely, that Karen was bright and kind and beautiful. That is who was standing at that bus stop at 12:30 in the morning on September 3rd, 1982. Bright and kind and beautiful. 15 years old, wearing her boyfriend's baseball cap with a Rush rock band insignia, a leather jacket, a striped shirt, and pants. Waiting for the bus that would take her home. She never boarded it. At around 10:45 in the morning on September 3rd, 1982, a truck driver named Stephen Bound was making a delivery to the Woolworth Garden Center on El Camino Real in Sunnyvale. He saw something near a cinder block wall roughly 100 yards from the bus stop where Karen had been left the night before. He stopped. He looked closer. Karen Stitt's body was there, hidden at the base of that wall, her naked body, her own clothing stripped from her and used to bind her arms and legs. Personal items she had been carrying, including makeup products, were scattered across the ground around her as though her bag had been emptied or thrown. Detective Matt Hutchison, who would come to this case more than 3 decades later and become the man who finally solved it, described the scene as the most graphic and violent he had encountered in his entire career, as both a police officer and a firefighter. There was blood on the wall behind her body, blood on top of the wall above her. The violence had been extraordinary, sustained, personal in its ferocity. The medical examiner confirmed the full horror. Karen had been sexually assaulted. She had been stabbed 59 times. Cause of death, the wounds. The binding of her limbs with her own clothes. A killer who had been with her in that dark space between that wall and that bus stop for long enough to do all of it and then arrange her body and walk away. Her killer had left something behind that he could not have known would one day identify him. His own blood on the cinder block wall, on Karen's leather jacket, biological material that in 1982 could yield only a blood type, but which, 40 years later, would speak with absolute precision. Sunnyvale police launched an immediate investigation. Detectives interviewed witnesses up and down El Camino Real. They canvassed the neighborhood. They established a timeline. They identified and questioned Karen's boyfriend, the 17-year-old David Woods, who had walked her to the bus stop and run home. He became a suspect not because of evidence, but because in cases like this, the person last seen with the victim is always looked at first. He would remain under that shadow for 40 years. He was innocent. The DNA would eventually confirm it completely. But in 1982, without the science to read what was on that wall, the investigation had nowhere to go. The case went cold. Karen Stitt's murder was not forgotten. It was simply unanswerable. For nearly 2 decades, the biological evidence at the scene could only speak in blood types, not names, not faces, not addresses. In 2000, investigators finally extracted a full DNA profile from the evidence, the blood and bodily fluid the killer had left behind. It was uploaded to CODIS, the National Combined DNA Index System. 0 matches. The killer had no criminal record requiring a DNA sample. He was not in any database anywhere. The profile confirmed one thing immediately. David Woods, Karen's boyfriend, who had carried the shadow of suspicion since the night she died, was definitively, scientifically eliminated. He had not killed her. The profile did not match him. 40 years of unspoken suspicion, cleared in a single comparison. But the name behind the profile remained unknown. The case was periodically revisited. New detectives would pick up the file, review the evidence, find the same wall. The DNA profile existed. The databases had no answer. The investigation had nothing left to pull. Then, in 2017, the Sunnyvale Department of Public Safety began a formal collaboration with the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Cold Case Unit. Karen's file was assigned to Detective Matt Hutchison. What happened next is what happens when you put the right person on the right case. Hutchison was not a man who accepted walls. He had a tool the original investigators never had. Not just improved DNA technology, but genealogical databases. The same consumer ancestry services that millions of ordinary people use to trace their family histories had become, in the hands of skilled investigators, a backdoor into the identity of unknown DNA contributors. In early 2019, a tip came in. The tip pointed Hutchison toward a specific possibility, that Karen's killer was likely one of 4 brothers from Fresno, California. Not a name, not a face, a family. 4 potential suspects sharing the same genetic profile the same way brothers always do. Hutchison now had to figure out which one. He did not wait for the answer to come to him. He went looking for it himself. He dug through newspaper obituaries. He searched databases. He scoured social media platform by platform, profile by profile, following the branches of the family tree outward until he found an edge he could reach. And on Facebook, he found it. A grandchild of the family. Someone on the outer branches of the tree connected by blood to the man he was looking for, close enough to matter. On April 8, 2022, Hutchison obtained a DNA sample from the grandchild. The analysis came back. High probability. The grandchild's father was connected to the crime scene DNA, and working backward from that through the family tree, through the 4 brothers, through the generations, the finger pointed to one man. Gary Gene Ramirez. Gary Gene Ramirez was born in 1947. He had grown up in Fresno, California, attended high school there, and served in the United States Air Force in the early 1970s. After leaving the military, he had moved frequently: the Bay Area Peninsula, San Francisco, San Diego, Colorado, Hawaii. A man in motion. A man who never stayed long enough in one place to become permanent. In 1982, at the time of Karen Stitt's murder, he had been frequenting or residing in the Bay Area. Sunnyvale was well within his territory. El Camino Real, the long commercial artery running through the heart of the peninsula, was a road he knew. He had no significant prior criminal record, nothing that had ever put his DNA into CODIS, nothing that had ever placed his name in the original investigation. He had not known Karen. He had not known her family. He had not known her boyfriend. Police concluded that what happened on the night of September 2nd into September 3rd, 1982 was a crime of opportunity. A predator who found a teenage girl alone at a bus stop after midnight and made a choice. By 2022, Ramirez was 75 years old. He was living in Makawao, on the island of Maui, Hawaii, settled, comfortable. A retiree on a Pacific island, as far from that cinder block wall in Sunnyvale as a person could get without leaving the country. The arrest operation took months of planning, a coordinated effort involving Santa Clara County, Maui law enforcement, and federal authorities. Funded in part by a grant from the United States Department of Justice, awarded in 2021 specifically for cold case investigation and prosecution. On August 2nd, 2022, officers went to Ramirez's home in Makawao. When they arrested him, Gary Ramirez said 3 words. "Oh my gosh." Not a denial, not outrage, not confusion. 3 words that carried 40 years of knowing exactly what he had done and believing, until that morning on his doorstep in Maui, that he had gotten away with it completely. He was extradited to California, arraigned on charges of murder, kidnapping, and rape. The legal process moved through the Santa Clara County court system with the full weight of 4 decades behind it. In February 2025, 42 years and 5 months after Karen Stitt's body was found near that cinder block wall, Gary Ramirez appeared in Santa Clara County Superior Court and pleaded no contest to first-degree murder. He was 78 years old, the same man who had been 35 years old on a September morning in 1982 when he found a teenage girl alone at a bus stop. On May 12, 2025, Judge Hanley Chu sentenced Gary Ramirez to 25 years to life with the possibility of parole, the maximum sentence available under the plea agreement. The people who loved Karen were in that courtroom. Michael Calhoun, the boy who had fallen for the new girl from Pittsburgh, who had become a law enforcement officer because of what happened to her, who had carried her for 42 years, stood up and spoke directly to Ramirez. He said, "Just because you've been caught, finally, and you will start serving your sentence, your punishment for your brutally gruesome crime, there will still never be closure. Karen is gone. We will never get her back." Then he said, "I will continue to carry Karen in my heart and soul until my last breath on this earth." Karen's parents had not lived to see this day. They died with the mystery intact, with the wound open, without a name, without a courtroom. But her Aunt Robin was there. Her family was there. And Detective Matt Hutchison, the man who had found a grandchild on Facebook, who had gone to Maui, who had watched Ramirez's face when the door opened, he was there too. DA Jeff Rosen said it in one sentence. Behind every old murder file in every major police department, there is a person, heartbreak, and a mystery. The mystery of Karen Stitt's death has been solved, thanks to advances in forensic science and a detective that would never, ever give up. Gary Ramirez left his own blood at the scene. Not just evidence from the assault. His blood, on the cinder block wall, on Karen's leather jacket. He had been injured during what he did, cut himself, scraped himself, and left the most personal biological signature a human being can leave without knowing it. He walked away that morning not realizing he had signed his name. In 2000, that signature finally spoke, but only in the language of elimination. It cleared David Woods. the teenager who ran home to beat his curfew. The boy who spent the next 40 years living with the unspoken weight of being the last person seen with Karen alive. He had been innocent from the first moment. The DNA confirmed it 20 years after the fact. But the cloud had already settled over him by then. That is what unsolved murders do to the people connected to them. They distribute grief to everyone nearby and call it suspicion. There is the tip. In early 2019, someone told Hutchison something pointed him toward Fresno, toward four brothers, toward a family. That tipster's identity and the precise nature of what they shared have never been fully disclosed. But without that tip, Hutchison has no starting point. The genealogical search has no direction. Ramirez retires in Maui and dies there comfortably, at a time of his choosing, never named. Someone knew something. After 37 years, they said it. And that single decision, one person deciding the truth mattered, set everything else in motion. There is the Facebook search. A detective at a desk in Sunnyvale, scrolling through social media looking for the outer branch of a Fresno family tree. This is what solving a 42-year-old cold case looks like. Not a dramatic breakthrough in a laboratory, not a confession called into a hotline, obituaries, database searches. A grandchild's profile picture. The patient, ordinary, essential work of following every branch until you find one you can hold. And there is Ramirez at 75 years old, on his doorstep in Maui, saying, "Oh my gosh." He had been living with that secret for 40 years, sitting with it, carrying it across cities and states and an ocean. And in 3 words, involuntary, reflexive, immediate, he confirmed everything. Karen's parents never heard those 3 words. They died without them. That is the weight no sentence can fully address. That is the irreducible cost of 42 years. Karen Stitt was 15 years old. Feathered blonde hair. A smile that lit up every room. A girl from Pittsburgh who moved to California and made it feel like home before the year was out because that is exactly who she was. Warm. Easy to love. The kind of person who made everyone around her feel like they had always known her. She rode a bus 10 miles in the dark to spend an evening with a boy she liked. She played video games and walked around a miniature golf course and sat outside an elementary school talking about nothing. She stood at a bus stop at 12:30 in the morning, wearing his rush cap and his smile, and waited for the bus home. She deserved to get on that bus. She deserved to grow up, to finish high school, to find out what came after 15, to become whoever she was going to become, all the versions of Karen Stitt that existed beyond that September morning in 1982. Instead, she is frozen at 15, frozen in the grief of a boy who spent 42 years becoming a law enforcement officer in her name, frozen in the memory of parents who died without an answer, frozen in the heart of an aunt who said, simply, that she was bright and kind and beautiful. But the blood on that wall did not freeze. It sat in an evidence locker for 40 years, holding his name without speaking it, waiting for a science that did not yet exist to arrive and read what it said. And a detective named Matt Hutchison showed up. He picked up a cold file in 2017 and refused to put it down. He followed a tip to a family in Fresno. He followed that family through obituaries and databases and social media until he found one grandchild on Facebook. He flew to Maui. He knocked on the door. And Gary Ramirez said, "Oh my gosh," on his own front doorstep, because some part of him had always known this day was coming. He is 78 years old. He is in a California state prison. He will be eligible for parole in 25 years. He will be 103 years old. He is never coming home. Karen never came home either. But she has a courtroom now. She has a sentence. She has a room full of people who loved her and showed up 42 years later to make sure the world heard it. And she has Michael Calhoun, who will carry her in his heart and soul until his last breath on this earth. If Karen's story reached you, if you believe that a 15-year-old girl in a leather jacket and a boyfriend's baseball cap deserves more than 42 years of silence, that a detective who searches Facebook at midnight for family trees deserves to know his work mattered, That families who wait decades for a courtroom deserve to be heard then, right now. Before you scroll past this, hit subscribe and leave a comment below. Tell us what part of Karen's story hit you the hardest. Because there are people out there right now, carrying exactly what David Woods carried for 40 years. Exactly what Karen's parents carried until they died. The unanswered question, the open wound, the name they never got. Every time you subscribe, every time you share, every time you leave a comment, you are telling those families that the world has not moved on, that these cases matter, that these names matter. Karen Stitt mattered. She always did. 42 years, 8 months, 9 days. The clock has stopped.